Hello to everybody over there in the internet. My name is Heribert Nacken from RWTH University in Germany, and I would like to give a presentation on some basics of e-learning. And I would like to start with a definition of blended learning. And right now you might think that this is just another buzzword, but definitely it isn't, because blended learning means that we would like to couple, to blend or to mix traditional face-to-face teaching plus the methodology of e-learning. Why that? I try to explain that. When we start from the different perspectives, having on one side classical teaching, face-to-face, you and me in a classroom, you know what learning and what teaching is all about. And we would like to add this by means of virtual teaching with e-learning. The reason for that is that we have to focus on two different perspectives. For example, we have to focus either on the situation of individually training people or of training and people or teaching people in cooperative learning. We have to focus to the point that we do have either dynamic or as well static content. Just to give you an example. Me being a hydrologist, I teach the water cycle to all my students. And this is not something that I did invent. All of the hydrologists, they are telling the same stories over and over again because the water cycle and the processes is not going to change even when climate is going to change. So on one side we have static content that is not going to change within years, let's say. On the other side, we do have very dynamic situations, things that are evolving. For example, in hydrology, there's something like a buzz in dead wood, or dead trees, dead wood in rivers. So we have to focus on content that is either static or either dynamic. We also have to focus on the situation that the knowledge management has to be done local or distributed over different areas, different training compartments. As well, we have to focus on the situation that we either communicate on a synchronous or asynchronous way. When we're face-to-face, it's quite straight and simple that we have synchronous communication. But for example, using learning management systems, we can apply methods of asynchronous communication. And last but not least, within the next future or the near future, we have to focus on stationary learning in classrooms as well as mobile learning. Why that? For example, if you travel to the university or if you go back to your home place and drive, for example, by train for 2 hours, you would not like to waste any time, any precious time. So you would like to have a small unit, a small technical gadget unit, to have all your material with you and start even learning while traveling all around. So we have to focus on all of these points, and if we link them, or as the name says, if we blend them, then we're going to have a blended learning system. And that's what we're basically focusing on, because we all know that there are different styles of learning. Some people are better off by hearing information. Some others have to write down each and everything that they heard within a classroom. And others, they can learn by explaining things to someone else. And by explaining, they're going to find out that they really did not get all the clues in detail. And by repeating and explaining in detail, they are going to have a better understanding of all the knowledge that I or you would like to exchange to the audience. So we have different styles of teaching and we have different styles of learning. So when we would like to make it very effective, we have to blend all these different ways. It can be classical face-to-face situations, like you all know, in one part. In the other part, we're just adding extra value by giving them these people's material that is set up with e-learning methodology. So maybe we can now focus on the way of how to exchange knowledge. For example, if I would like to exchange knowledge on the water cycle, and explain it to my students, I can get to their brains just by two different ways. Either I can tell them things and they can listen to me, so it goes straight through their ears, or I can explain them different informations by using video or animations, and this goes straight through the eyes. So we now come to a theory like that I personally love very much. It is the so-called dual code theory by Paivio, and I would like to explain it by giving you some short animations. So first of all, just figure out just to have a short picture of our brain. We do have, as you know, a working memory, but that's not the way where I like to focus on, because this is the memory that is recycled and recycled and recycled. So what I like to focus on is a long-term memory. There I would like to stick my information to so that it can be retrieved and retrieved over and over again. To go there, we have two different means. We have a verbal perception and we have a pictorial perception. And we do have to set up models. We're going to see that later on. We have either a verbal or oral model, or we are building a visual non-verbal model. And this comes to two different input channels, either the oral channel or the visual channel. So let's first start with an image information. I can now show you these slides. You can focus maybe on the videotape of me as the auditor, and in parallel you're going to have this picture of the Earth. So if you focus on this picture, this will be grasped by your pictorial perception. It goes through the visual channel. You're going to set up a non-verbal model, and last but not least, you're going to transform the information into the long-term memory. That's it. And as you can find out right now, this is going to happen independently. I can keep on talking, and you can have a look at the slide on the other side, and there will be no interruption in between. So when we go on, and when I would like to present text information, maybe on my slides, like you see, we're going to show you some text information, then we're going to have something different. First of all, we have to grasp it with our eyes, so it goes into the pictorial perception, but then we're going to have a swapping of channels, because this information has to be processed in a verbal perception. It goes through the verbal model, and it also is passed into the long-term memory. That's quite fine and normal. So then, as the next example, what is going to happen if I'm going to present oral information like I do right now?
How is this information processed?
This oral information is caught by your ears, and again is going to be transformed into the long-term memory and can be retrieved later on. Maybe you now start to wonder why I'm going to explain this to you, because this is so simple and all of you know these facts. It's because of the situation that I would like to show you in the next slide. What is going to happen if I'm going to present you text information and visual information, picture information, that is identical? I guess all of you know this by going to conferences where people stand in front of you and they are going to tell you information that is set up on their slides one by one, and they're just reading what they said on their slides. So what is going to happen in your brains concerning knowledge transfer from the speaker to your brains? So let's start it. I would like now to present you an oral and a written information that is totally identical.
How is this information processed?
With that, you see that the visual information and the oral information is going to pass through to the working memory, but then within the working memory we're going to have a clash. Why is that? The situation is that the visual information runs first, the oral information comes later on, and then you have to start setting up your model, your verbal model in the work memory. And this work memory has a limit capacity. So this is so-called magic 7, as you may know or might know. So we can just focus on 7 different units, or like they say, chunks. So if the redundant information, written information and oral information, is passed to the working memory, it comes to a clash. And you may wonder if you ever had such a situation, and I'm perfectly sure that you know it. For example, just wonder when you had a phone call and you could hear yourself again, your voice again, due to an acoustic feedback. If the time distance between these different informations is very small, you definitely are not going to be able to keep on talking. You are going to be stuck in between. That's because your working memory is not capable of setting up a model. And therefore, the information is going to be lost. Because within the working memory, within this system of limit capacity of 7 chunks, you are not going to set up the model, and you are not able to transform it to the long-term memory. So I'm going to tell you this and going to show you, just to give you the idea that whenever we would like to exchange knowledge from ourselves to someone else, we have to focus on the different ways of how the audience is grasping the information and is really working hard to make the most out of it within the working memory. So whenever we focus on setting up content in an e-learning situation or a blended learning situation, we should focus on a theory that is called Selection, Organization and Integration, so-called SOI model. And it has many, but just focusing on 3 different aspects. First aspect is, and that's the only time I'm going to do this, to present what I have written on my slides. We as humans, we strictly separate and we differentiate between the oral and the visual input. Some of us are better off in listening to information, and some of us are better off in reading the information. So that is one reason, again, to always show information, knowledge informations in different styles, in different perspectives, so that different styles of learning can be focused on. We do have this limit capacity. So if we just push too hard on our visual or oral perception, then we're never going to manage to transform what we really would like to exchange as knowledge to your brains. So always remember that our capacity is limited, and that the methods of exchanging our knowledge to the audience has to focus on that. And last but not least, learning is a very, very active process. There are some people that say that we even learn while we're sleeping. Might be. But normally we have to push hard to get some new knowledge and to learn something. So we always have to develop what we call a coherent and mental model, or we can also say we have to set up a reproduction of the knowledge objects within our brains so that we can retrieve it. And this is not about entertaining people. In Germany we say that it comes from labor. So it has its origin in hardship. It's not about entertaining people when we talk about e-learning. It has to be fun anyway, because if you have an emotional situation where you can learn things, we know that the information and the process of transforming knowledge to your brains is better off. But definitely we have to push hard to learn things. So what about some didactical structures that we are using when setting up this content? One thing is we always try to break it down in small modules, and we always set up a topic, for example the water cycle, into 1, 2, 3 different stages. 2 of them are mandatory, 1 of them is optional. What is this? So just think of transforming information from the water cycle would start with the knowledge transfer, a so-called knowledge object. Such a knowledge object could be a videotape of a talk like you see right now, or it can be a video script, or it can be an animation of the water cycle. But anyway, within these modules, we would like to transform the basic information to the audience. When we did so in the second step, we always would like to have an assessment or a self-assessment. These kinds of assessments are normally done within the quizzes set up in the QTI standard. But assessment doesn't only mean it's going to be an assessment for the students, it's also an assessment for me as a teacher. Why that? For example, if I'm going to give these quizzes to my students each and every time when I leave the classroom, and I'm going to make sure that they have to make at least 70% of all the questions, and then one day I'm going to find out that the whole class is just having, let's say, like 30 or 40% of all the quiz questions, then I know that it's not their fault but mine, because I did a bad exchange of knowledge from me to them. So assessing means also is an assessment, always an assessment for the student and as well for me as being a teacher. And you all know, as learning is a hard process, when you finally received to do something, when you really got the clue out of the information, you're kind of proud. And you say, oh, I did a good job. And if you did so, then you're willing and you're able and you're capable to go on and have a look at even more advanced knowledge contents. So it's also about motivating people to go on and go on and go on and keep on trying to make the best out of the process of knowledge transfer. So what we say is that step 1 and step 2 should always be mandatory, because knowledge transfer without assessment, as for me, really is no use at all. We always have to find out whether the process of exchange of knowledge has been a success or not. So knowledge transfer and assessment are mandatory, and you can find out whether you would like to, your students or the group that you would like to educate or to train is willing to even go on and force them into some advanced knowledge. So, as I said, we always keeping it to small and tiny modules, or like you see, it's named as a topic. And if we do so, then we can set up a learning logic, starting with topic A, going further on to topic B, and at least setting up the mandatory styles of knowledge transfer and self-assessment, and go on. Sometimes it's not necessary, and sometimes it's not nearly the best way of doing it in a way of a linear chain. So you might jump from topic A to topic M, but then it might be a good idea to start with an assessment, because if someone just jumps into a content or jumps into a certain knowledge object, you might wonder if he or she is really capable of doing so. So you might start with an assessment in front, and if he passes the assessment, he or she can go on. If not, he has to go on and rehearse other things. So you're very free to set up this learning logic style. So we do have different grades of e-learning, because e-learning, it's about distribution of information, it's about interaction between the teacher and the audience, like we can't do right now in the internet. It's just me telling you, and I don't know whether you're still attending it or not. So interaction is a thing that we can best do within traditional face-to-face teaching, and it's about collaboration. So we can learn from information, we can learn from the feedback. You can have the feedback from a trainer, you can have the feedback from your partner, or we can learn from multiple perspectives, or we can even learn in the way that we're touched emotionally by what we did. And this is giving us a better perspective on this knowledge object. So when starting with e-learning, we have to do it on the platform of learning from information by distribution or by distributing different materials. But this is just the platform, and we should go on, and we have to go on and climb up all the hill to finally reach the stage that we learn from multiple perspectives and from collaboration. There are some more details on the principles of e-learning, but I will not bother you with that in this e-lecture. You can read it in different scripts, and you can read it in different books on that. So I would rather like to stick on what, as for me, still is missing. There are so many brilliant tools on the market right now. They can do nearly whatever you would like to do, but it's not, as I say, definitely not on the tools. There are still some things missing. For example, we still don't have a math QTI standard. We don't have a standard for setting up quizzes in a context of mathematical calculus. And me being a hydrologist and coming from civil engineering, we would like to calculate things, and we would like to exchange information to people, and we even have to figure some things out. We have to have numerous calculations, and this definitely is going to be something that we are looking for to have in the near future. And as said before, it is not very easy to incorporate mathematical calculus in different assessments. And I can set up quizzes in a descriptive way, but if each and every time or once in a while, I always have to ask my students to calculate something, to have mathematical calculus. And we're still looking for that. The next point, I believe, is the most serious thing that is missing, because proper and joint pedagogical design patterns, that's what we're definitely not going to have at the moment. And I would like to quote a very, very wise American guy who once said, e-learning or blended learning, it's definitely not about using tools or software. It's all about your design patterns. If your design pattern is wrong, the technique is only helping you to do more things wrong in less time. And that is really, really true. So we have to focus on the point that all these tools and all the software, they are just helpful things to transform our didactical structure. And as for me, I think the design patterns and the pedagogical design patterns, we're not yet at the position where we could or should be. And the next point, knowledge objects really compatible to existing standards. We do have standards like SCORM 2004, and if we focus on different learning management systems, they all are telling us that they are focusing on SCORM, but in reality, it really is a problem to exchange information. We just tried here over in Germany to exchange information from university to university because, as I said before, water cycle isn't different or has no difference in Cologne or Munich or Aachen. So why not set up one module of explaining the water cycle, for example, here in Aachen, and exchanging it to someone else? And it comes to the next point. I think that we should have a stock exchange, an e-learning stock exchange. It can be commercial, it can be non-commercial. For example, if we exchange information within university, I guess we should have non-commercial exchanges or stock exchanges. To give you an example, for example, if I join a group of, let's say, in total 5 hydrologists, and we would find out that we're specialized on different topics. For example, I myself could set up an e-learning course on the water cycle and share it with my colleagues. And by getting all the contents that they are set up, I just set up one module by myself, and I'm going to have 4 different modules from my colleagues. So that is what you call as a win-win situation. And whether you are going to do it in a commercial or non-commercial way, I think it's up to you, but we should start thinking of having a stock exchange with contents that is really compatible to existing standards. And standards, to focus on that again, are not something that are going to start now and stay there for the next years. We have to know that it is highly, highly dynamical, what we're setting up. So within blended learning or e-learning, at university or at teaching, we never reach the final point. We just go on and keep on tracking new information, new knowledge, and we're going to ever to be on the process of everlasting learning within our whole lifetime. So that's what I would like to present to you, and our conclusion on that is that it's either to E or not to B. So thank you very much for your attention. See you.